Today I want to share with you how to make St. Patrick's bacon casserole, perfect for your St. Patrick's Day celebration. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nourishing foods like bone broth, ferment, sourdough, and more. So if you enjoy learning how to be a modern pioneer in the kitchen, consider subscribing to my channel and don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Now I just want to quickly mention that if at any time you want to jump ahead, I'll have the chapter timestamps in the description underneath this video. And I'll also have the link there to the printable recipe. So who was St. Patrick, or Patrick as some of you may know him as? Well, he was a man who was born somewhere around the year 390 AD. St. Patrick lived in Britain, but he was kidnapped by pirates and brought to Ireland. While in Ireland, Patrick was made to work as a shepherd, but he prayed every day that he would one day be able to return home. And eventually he got the opportunity. He convinced some sailors to bring him back to Britain. But while he was there, he decided that he would study to become a priest. And eventually, as a priest, returned to Ireland. And today he is venerated as St. Patrick, and we celebrate his feast day on March 17th. And as they say, no matter where you're from, on St. Patrick's Day, everybody's a little Irish. Now in the past, I've shared with you a whole host of recipes for St. Patrick's Day, and I'll be sure to link to the playlist in the description underneath this video, where I've got how to make corned beef and cabbage on the stovetop and in the Instant Pot. I've got a couple of Irish soda breads for you, as well as a lovely Irish apple cake. But today I thought it would be fun to make something different. I have this book, and it's very cutely titled, Cooking with the Saints. And when I was looking through it, I found a number of recipes for St. Patrick's Day. And the one that really pulled me in was St. Patrick's bacon. I think everything tastes great with bacon, so I think this casserole is going to be delicious. First, let's go over the ingredients that we're going to need to make this St. Patrick's bacon casserole. You're going to want 3 average-sized potatoes. The recipe that I'm following lists everything in pounds or ounces, but basically it says that you're going to need 1.25 pounds of potatoes, and I think about 3 medium size, this one's a little on the smaller side, is about 1.25 pounds. And you're going to want a starchy potato, like a Yukon Gold, which is what I have here, or a russet. Your more waxy potatoes, like your Redskin potatoes, don't work as well in this particular casserole. Next, you're going to need 1 cup of milk, 1 egg, and 2 tablespoons of butter. Plus, you're going to need a little extra butter to butter the baking dish, which we'll talk about in a minute. Plus, you're going to need some salt and pepper. I've just got some fine ground sea salt, and I'm going to grind the black pepper fresh. Next, you're going to need 1 medium-sized onion. You're going to want to peel it, and then you're going to want to slice it thinly. And remember, don't throw out your onion skins. Add these to your scrap bag for when you make a bone broth or another type of vegetable broth. These are very rich in nutrition, and you don't want to throw them out. Then the star of the show, the bacon. And this recipe calls for what's referred to as back bacon. Here in the United States, that would be very similar to Canadian bacon, which I believe in Canada they simply call back bacon. So you'll have to let me know about that, my friends to the north. Now, although in the United States, the Canadian bacon is usually completely round and very lean, I was very happy to find this bacon. It was labeled a Canadian bacon, but it looked more like the picture in the cookbook. And it's a little more oval, and it's got a little bit of the fat in place. And so I thought that that was a good option because, as I said, it resembled the bacon used in the actual recipe. But use whatever you have on hand. Now, here in the United States, when we often think of bacon, we think of the long strips. They're not using that in this recipe, but to a certain extent, I think it might work if that's all that you have available to you. Now, for making this St. Patrick's bacon casserole, the first thing that we need to do is peel our potatoes. Now, just like with your onion skins, I don't want you to throw out your potato peels. You have a couple of options as to what you can do with these. You can lay these out on a parchment-lined baking sheet and dry them in your oven on its lowest setting. Once these are dry, you can grind them up like in a little spice grinder and reserve that powder to then add to room temperature water that you use to feed your sourdough starter. And you don't need to put a lot in, maybe like a teaspoon in whatever amount of water you're using to feed your sourdough starter. And the reason is your sourdough starter is going to love all of the starch that these potatoes have, and it'll give it a nice boost. It's especially helpful if you're ever struggling with your sourdough starter to get it nice and bubbly. Alternatively, you can take these potato peels, put them in a saucepan, cover them with water, bring it up to a boil, and then turn it down to its lowest simmer on your stovetop, put the lid on, and let them simmer on low for about 20 or 30 minutes. Once you've let them simmer, just remove the potato peels, and the water that you have can be reserved once it reaches room temperature to replace any other type of water you would use to feed your sourdough starter. So both of these waters, whether you add a little bit of the powdered potato peels or you simply use water in which you've simmered the potato peels, are what I think of as fortified waters, and they often help give a nice boost to your sourdough starter. Now all we want to do is slice our potatoes very thinly. Just do the best job that you can. That's the nice thing about home cooking. It's not an exact science. You just want to get it thinly sliced. Now that we've got our potatoes sliced, we need to go ahead and assemble our casserole. Now, the recipe does not indicate what size casserole dish you need, but what I've got here is an 8.5 by an 8.5, 8.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And the reason I picked this size was because the recipe says that it serves 4. So I think that this will work. But if you have a rectangle-shaped casserole dish or an oval casserole dish, I think those would work as well. But what you need to remember to do is to make sure that it's well greased, and I've got this well greased with butter. Now what we're going to do is layer the potatoes and the onions together. And as we do that, we're going to sprinkle each layer with salt and pepper. Now we're going to start with potatoes and we want to end with potatoes. Now don't worry if they don't fit exactly. It's okay if they overlap a little. Just do the best that you can. In many ways, if you've ever made scalloped potatoes or au gratin potatoes, in many ways this is very similar. The only difference is we're also layering in onions. Then once you get your layer of potatoes in your baking dish, you want to take your thinly sliced onions and put a layer of them on top of your potatoes. Next, I'm going to take just a little bit of salt. The recipe doesn't indicate exactly how much salt you're going to need overall, but basically what I'm doing is putting a pinch of a sprinkle over the potato and onions, and then I'm just going to come in here with some freshly ground black pepper. Now that I've got my salt and pepper in here, I'm going to go in with my second layer of potatoes and then my second layer of onions and then more salt and pepper. Well, I've got all my layers in and I've sprinkled my potatoes with salt. Now I'm just going to give another twist here of some black pepper. Next, what we need to do is take our milk and put the egg into there. And I think that's sort of like we're making a little custard. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour this egg right down, plop, into my milk. I like to break it in a little bowl all on its own, just in case it's not looking too good. But this egg looked beautiful. Now, I'm just going to whip this egg in with this milk. And if you've been with me a while, you know how much I love my magic whisk. Years ago, this thing is just so wonderful. Years ago, I was watching a cooking show with Nigella Lawson, and she was using this magic whisk, and she was raving about how much she loved it. And I said, oh, I've got to try it. And I found one. And they're just a couple of dollars. You probably will find them if you have like a local kitchen store in your area, or maybe in the kitchen aisle at your grocery store. And if not, I'll put a link in the description underneath this video. But try to find it locally if you can. But what is so terrific about this, look at how beautifully and easily it incorporated that egg into the milk. Now we're just going to take our egg and milk mixture and we're going to pour this right over our potato and onion mixture. Next, we're going to take our 2 tablespoons of butter and we're just going to dot the top of our casserole. Now, all that's left to do after we've dotted our casserole with the butter is to take our bacon and just sit it on top of the potato mixture. Now that we've got our bacon on top of our casserole, the recipe says to cover the baking dish, and then we're going to go ahead and put this into a 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. And we're going to bake this covered for 1 hour at that 350-degree Fahrenheit temperature. Well, after 1 hour, I remove the aluminum foil and let the casserole continue to cook for another 15 minutes, and it looks glorious. I'm anxious to give this a taste. Now, this is supposed to be for 4 people, and I think that's why you use just 4 pieces of bacon. In this case, the back bacon or the Canadian bacon. But let me scoop this out. Let me get my plate here. All righty. Oh, this looks wonderful. Oh, I think if you like scalloped potatoes or rotten potatoes, things along those lines, I think this is going to be wonderful. Let me move this a little. It's very hot. Well, I'm going to slice this so that I can get a little bit of everything. I want to get the potatoes and the onions. I'll bring you in close so you can see everything on this fork. Oh, this looks wonderful. I love the way the custard, you know, has that egg in it. This looks great. Oh, that is delicious. You're going to really enjoy this. Now, if you'd like more St. Patrick's Day recipes, be sure to click on this playlist over here where I've got corned beef and cabbage, Irish soda bread, and Irish apple cake, and more. And I look forward to seeing you over there in my Hill Country kitchen. Love, God bless, and happy St. Patrick's Day. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.